Welcome to Amintro Family, the podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Sammut. We hope you're enjoying the free online platform and community for family caregivers, be it through the Amintro Family app or amintrofamily.com, because it's all about helping those caring for their aging parents and relatives or friends and to connect and share experiences and access valuable resources. Our guest today is caregiver Terri Oswald. Terri, really appreciate your taking the time. Thank you.
My pleasure, Jeff. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Now, we want to hear about your caregiving journey. How far back are we going to when it all started?
Oh, gosh. About 9 years ago, I moved into my parents' home after a year of coming every Sunday to help my mom out. She was declining. It was obvious that cognitively she was having some challenges. Physically, she was having some challenges. And then towards the end, I was concerned for her safety. And unfortunately, that concern was realized after a day that I came to help her. And I was about to go downstairs with the vacuum cleaner in my hand when I looked into the kitchen and I noticed her standing kind of like looking around, almost like, what's going on here? And, there's two pots on the stove and she's just kind of staring. And I had this weird feeling that she was kind of zoning out. And I thought, okay, well, she could be in thought or there could be something else going on here. And so I put the vacuum cleaner down on the floor and I decided to stay for a moment. And in that moment, she reached over to stir a pot and she had no clue that the sleeve of her gown caught fire.
Oh,
Instant, her sleeve was on fire and I pounced like a cat. And I went, oh my God, Mom, you're on fire. And I grabbed her and I pulled her to the sink and I was throwing water on her. And she's getting angry with me and she's saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm all wet. What are you doing? And I tried to explain to her, Ma, your sleeve is on fire. And she's like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with you. And I didn't want to get into a screaming match clearly. And my emotion level was very high. And she was annoyed with me because she thought I was doing something stupid. She really did not understand what was happening in that moment. Of course, I am panicking. And then, my dad is in the other room, lying down on the couch, having a nap, and he didn't hear a thing. And I realized that, my God, for that split second, if I had gone downstairs and carried on about my day like I was about to and start vacuuming downstairs, she would have been completely engulfed in flames. And this would have been a different story.
wow.
In
Wow.
that,
It's such a good thing that you were there, Terri, and that you were paying attention.
that moment is, forgive the word, the choice of words, but that moment is burned in my memory forever. And every time I think about that, I still get a tight chest and I think, Jesus, had I, like, for that split second, had I not stopped to just check in on her and just continued on going downstairs, she would have been dead. No doubt in my mind.
Wow. So
Or,
leading up to your visit, Terri, had your dad made you aware that something's off? Something's going on here?
you know what? My father, God bless him, is a proud man, and like so many other husbands, European husbands, they do their own thing. My dad has his garden to take care of, and and it was summertime, and so I don't think he really realized how much she had declined, but I did. I
Yeah, well,
did.
sometimes when you're in it,
Yes.
you don't realize it, right? You don't realize a change. Like very often what happens is you might not have noticed a decline in your mother's health, but your husband would have.
Yes.
The partner often
Yeah.
notices. That's what happened in my family. Like my wife noticed more than I did. And I'm like, that's just him. No, no, no. She's like, that's not how he was a year ago. Something's
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
So
And those little subtle things that I was noticing as time went on that were changing, but I honestly did not. I thought that she would be a danger to herself in other ways, like you know, she would put something on the stove and she walked away and she forgot. And I thought, all right, something's got the pot's going to get on fire or something like that. And I thought, that could be a precarious situation in and of itself. But I had no idea. The thought had not crossed my mind that she would, that something like that would happen. I knew there were changes and I knew that, that was starting to happen. And my husband and I and my daughter discussed it. And we had agreed that, I've been saying for years, honestly, Jeff, I've been saying for years to my family that when the time comes, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. When the time comes, it'll be me that takes care of mom and dad, and I would be willing either to move in with them or have them move in with me, whatever. And at the time that I mentioned it to my father, he looked at me like I had 5 heads and he said, I'm fine, and I still have my garden, and no, we're fine. And I said, okay, Dad, when the time comes, then it'll be me moving in, probably. So we'll see where that goes. And I think my siblings took me seriously enough, but it was also a long time ago. And they said, we'll see what happens when the time comes, kind of thing. Well, 20 years later, the time came. And my husband and I were discussing the possibility of moving in. My boys were already older, moved on, but my daughter was still young in high school. And we were discussing that maybe by the time she goes to university would be the time to move in with my parents. But that incident happened. I remember going home, and as soon as I walked through the door, they looked at me like, is everything okay? And then I just let loose. I started crying, and it was like post-traumatic stress. The adrenaline kicked in. First, the logic and the I need to do what I need to do took over, and I hosed her down, and everything was fine. But I think it hit me later when I was explaining to my husband and my daughter what had happened. And thankfully, both my husband and my daughter looked at each other and said, you know what, Sierra, I think for mom's sake, we're going to have to move in sooner than we thought, because now that this has happened, mom's not going to sleep. And they were both right, because I was panicking from that moment on. It was a panic every day, thinking, is this going to happen again? Is my dad going to hear something? Nobody's going to be around if this repeats itself or something else happens. And, and fear just overcame me. And from shortly after that, I had a chat with my siblings. I told my parents we're moving in. This incident happened in August, and by November we were moved in.
Wow. So the three of you moved in. So what'd
Yes.
you do with your house? You sold your house or what? You
We were
kept it?
in an apartment, and we were actually looking to buy a house. We were in transition,
Oh,
and we had put in an offer on a house, and it was declined. And I remember distinctly that happened on a Friday. We were declined. The offer was rejected, and then on Sunday the incident happened. And I said, there are angels watching, because had we accepted the offer, mind you, it was still, we would have had the 30 days or whatever, but still,
still,
it was a blessing.
everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely, it was a
Blessing in
blessing.
disguise, as you were saying. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the decision's made. You have your husband supporting you and you have your daughter supporting you. Like, yeah, we get it. We're doing this.
Yes.
What did it feel like when you finally moved in and you got settled and now you have a new life? Now you have a new full-time job. What was that transition like for you?
It was not easy. It was a challenge, because I did it with every ounce of love in my heart.
Yeah.
And my husband did it with every ounce of love in his heart to support both me and my family. But I don't think we really wrapped our head around how much our life was going to change. I don't resent any of it. It's been 9 years. I don't resent any of it, but it has been a challenge. And I think one of the first things that we realized that we lost is our privacy.
Mm,
And also that sense of responsibility that I can't just pawn off. I can't just call somebody up and say, can you come over for a few hours or whatever? And even though I have 4 siblings, it wasn't easy for me, to say, hey, are you guys free? Can you come on over? Because what I found was happening, is I was feeling guilty for asking for extra help. And they kept saying, let us know if you need help. And sometimes I would reach out for the extra help, and they're all busy with their lives. And I don't really need the help during the week while I'm working, because we had that routine down to a science. But on a Friday night or a Saturday night, occasionally we'd like to go out, and nobody was really available. And I kind of got tired of asking. I felt kind of bad. Oh, we have tickets to a concert, or oh, we're going away for the weekend, or oh, we're golfing, or we're away at the cottage, or whatever. And I thought, oh, okay, you know so that was a bit of a challenge. And in those days when we first moved in, it wasn't critical care yet, right?
Yeah.
The critical care really kicked in when COVID hit. That's when things changed, because both my parents got COVID. Both of them were hit hard by it, but my mom got it the worst, and they weren't vaccinated. And so I often wonder, what would it have been like if my mom had been vaccinated? Could we have prevented the rapid decline? Because when she got COVID, that was the beginning of the end.
Really,
Um,
that took its toll, did it?
Absolutely, because my mom had tuberculosis when she was young, and she already was predisposed to a lung condition. And of course, they said elderly and those predisposed to lung conditions were more at risk than others. But like so many families, we were kind of, some were against vaccination, some were for vaccination. I was trying to convince my parents to get vaccinated, but they were hearing both sides of the story, and ultimately the decision had to be theirs. And they had decided initially not to get vaccinated. And then it happened, and
Yeah. Yeah.
can't go, right? So
How how long ago did you lose your mother?
it'll be 3 years in this August.
3 years. So it was 2023. So I'm comparing it to my dad because my dad had Alzheimer's. Our stories quite mirror each other in terms of timeline. But my father passed in 2021. And at the time, and I'm going to call it a regret, but there's nothing I could have done about it. We had a funeral for him, but there was only 9 of us there
Oh
because
God.
we couldn't have my wife and kids weren't at my father's funeral. I was there without them. And
Oh
I'm not
my.
trying to make this about me, but that's what we went through. And I was curious with the funeral if you would have had the same situation, but I would think by 2023
No.
you were able to have more people there.
Yeah, everything was opened up again, and life was as back to as normal as possible. The challenge that I had was when she was in the hospital, they wouldn't let me in.
Yes.
My mom speaks Italian, that's her primary language. She spoke English well enough, although as she declined, her English was not as good as it used to be. And the doctors, the nurses, whatever, wouldn't let me in. And then finally, I put up enough of a stink that they finally let me in. And when they let me in, I could not believe the condition that she was in. And I cannot say that it is the fault of the nurses, because they were short staffed and all that kind of stuff. But can you imagine the horrific sight of walking in, and she looked like she was on death's door? She had an unchanged diaper. I don't know how long she was sitting in it, but it was all the way up her back. I had to change her and bathe her. And they kept saying, well, she's not listening to us, and she's not eating, and she's not really, well, I'm like, her hearing aid is on the side of the table. The table is not within arm's reach. Neither is a glass for drinking. She can't hear you because nobody put her hearing aid in her ear, and all these things. And I was so frustrated with the care that I just refused to keep her there. And so, against medical advice, I said, I'm taking her home. And well, you can't, because she needs to go. What does she need? She needs oxygen. She needs this. She needs that. I can give that to her at home. So really, there is no reason for me to keep her here. I'm going to take her home. Well, then you're going to have to sign. I don't give a shit what I have to sign. Forgive my French.
Yeah.
I don't care what I got to sign. I'm taking her home. I can arrange oxygen. I can arrange a hospital bed. I'm taking her home, because the care that I can give her at home will exceed any care that she's currently getting now. And and of course I threw in the whole, my husband works for global television, and I would love to get them to do a story on this. So how about before you have a PR nightmare on your hands, let's just get this done. And they quietly agreed to it, and I got her out and I brought her home. And what she needed was intense, round the clock care. And I was able to give it to her. My siblings were coming regularly, between my three siblings. Every day somebody was here for lunch to take care of her. We had PSW care as well. And so I'm dealing with the rotation of other services, and other people coming in the house. And now I'm dealing with ordering diapers and other critical care, things that I need. And so it became a whole other, and she did recover a little bit. Um, and she did reach a point where we were able to get a wheelchair, and she would be in the wheelchair, and she took a few steps with assistance and stuff. And she kind of peaked, and then she started going downhill again. So, and then she started declining, and it was just downhill from there.
So,
So,
so how long did you play the role of nurse slash manager slash schedule maker slash admin?
uh,
How long did you play that role?
intensely about 3 years.
3 years?
Yes.
Did you work? Like, did you
Yeah.
have a job
Yes. And I'm still working.
and you parented?
Yes.
You must look back at that time and wonder how you did all that.
Well, I look back at it and I am grateful for the help that I had. Like I said, my siblings were here, every day. They were here for a couple hours each. But, they were taking care of them during the day while I was at work. But the real work was, nights and weekends. And I didn't have PSWs come in the evening. I was changing her diaper, I was giving her her bath. And then on the weekends, if you can believe this, we were supposed to have PSW care, and I can't tell you how many times they didn't show up. There was always some excuse. Oh, the weather is bad. Oh, she's sick today. Oh, whatever. There was always something. And I would say half the time PSWs didn't show up. And I was the one who was, giving her her bath and changing her bed sheets and changing her diaper. And it was, yeah, it was not easy. And again, when my siblings came, they did what they could. But the fact is that I'm the 24/7 caregiver, and the brunt of the brunt of the care fell on me. And I know my siblings were appreciative of it. That wasn't the issue. The issue is that, it does take a toll on you. And I felt there were a lot of times where I felt like, as much as I'm doing, I feel like I'm not doing enough. Is there more that I could be doing? My husband was doing so much, and I could not have done it without him. My daughter was in school. She finished high school. She was in university. Um, you know, I couldn't rely on her for anything because she was trying to forge her own life.
Oh,
And so,
sure. So in those 3 years, if you needed a day, I know this might sound silly, you're gonna laugh at me, but if you needed a day, I'm sure in those 3 years you got sick. You were down and out,
oh
or
yeah,
mentally exhausted, and you needed a break. And maybe the break only came in the form of I'm going to Tim's for a coffee by myself, see you in a half hour. But if you were down for the day, who stepped up? It was a collective effort, I'm sure, with your siblings and your husband leading the way.
it was mostly my husband who stepped up, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
He rock. I would have sunk like a the Titanic. I would have gone down if
sure.
it wasn't for Roy. I would have given up, or I would have had to beg my siblings for more help, more time. They would have had to come on weekends, including Saturday and Sunday, not just a couple hours at lunch or whatever. And I did. There were times where they did do extra, but again, in comparison to what I was doing and what my husband was doing, the lion's share of the work was on me and Roy.
Sure. Did you feel any? resentment? Did you feel sorry for yourself at times during that time, which would have been understandable? And if you did, how did you manage that?
I didn't really feel sorry for myself, but I did feel frustrated, definitely. And there were times where, Roy knows me so well. There were times I would have that look on my face, and he'd say, "Go for a drive. Just get out, go. Your mom's fine, your dad's fine. They've had dinner. Just go for a drive, go for a walk, go for whatever."
Mhm.
And I would do that, and it would be a release. There were a couple of times I'd get in the car and drive away and pull into a parking lot and just scream. uh
Wow.
it was literally like open the vent, let the steam out, and just, and I'd let out a scream, and then I'd shed some tears, and I'd take some deep breaths, and then I'd come back and, do the best that I could.
Yeah.
I i I remember there was a time where one of my brothers said, because I kept saying, if I had only known this, I could have done this, or maybe I could have done more, or maybe if I'd have known sooner, I would have. And he said, "Would you stop that?" He says, "You're like that character in Schindler's List. I could have saved one more. I could have done this. I could have done that. You're doing enough, and you've done enough. And so stop feeling guilty, and just, we're grateful for what you did, what you've done, what you're doing, and there's no more that you could do. So just
What about your dad's health throughout all of this? Like, are as much care as your mother needed at the time, are you also caring for your dad, and to what degree?
Yes. So at the time, my dad's, cognitive abilities were starting to decline. He was forgetful. He was repeating things. He was asking the same question, multiple times. And I thought, wow, his short-term memory is disappearing. His long-term memory was intact, but his short-term memory is definitely disappearing. Um, but he was still okay. But 3 years, almost 3 years after her death, I can tell you now, he relies heavily on his cane.
Mm,
He is unstable. He could very easily fall. So I'm terrified when he goes down the steps and I don't watch him. He, he's very dependent on me. He's still, like, he speaks. He's not. He knows who people are. It's nothing like that. But he is definitely, his short-term memory has disappeared. So he it's like he's on a loop, right? He'll ask the same question
yeah.
over and over. And I travel still for work, and when I'm gone, Roy will say, "Yeah, your dad asked at least 6 or 7 times, when is Teresa coming home? When is Teresa coming?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So,
not, he's not in diapers that require changes. He's still walking around independently in the house. He's still able to take a shower by himself. Of course, the door is never locked, and I'm always listening in case, something happens and he falls or whatever. But he's still okay. He doesn't require nearly the kind of care that my mom required, not by a
right.
long shot. So
Yeah.
we're okay with him, but I can't leave him alone. And
Yeah.
husband and I want to go out on a date night, again, it's the same thing. Like, it's been a few times that I asked my siblings, and something's always going on. They've always got tickets to a show, or they're away or whatever. And sometimes they say, "Oh, maybe I can change something around and free myself up." And and sometimes it works out that they're available, but I I I feel like, and I shouldn't, but I feel like, well, I don't want to ask them because I feel like I'm putting them out. And then I stop myself, and my husband looks at me and says, "It's their father too, it's not just
Yeah.
your." But
That's right.
I don't want to put that test balloon out and then get that response of, "Oh, sorry, no one's available," or whatever. I feel like I would rather not deal with that. Yeah.
I understand that. And your husband is right, but I do understand that. And I I can I can understand from the standpoint to a certain extent because sometimes over the years I floated out some trial balloons and it didn't work out. So I just went, you know what, forget it. It's fine. I can eat that. That's okay. And
Yeah.
overall, it wasn't the end of the world. But I think, and again, comparing our situations, I remember thinking, when my father passed away, my mom, and she still is, I do care for her. Like I do a lot of things for her, but she's got her own home and she's independent and she moves around and Cognitively, she's perfectly fine. I'm very fortunate in that way. But uh, I had the time to go, whew. And again, I wasn't the primary caregiver, but I was supporting my mother. But and a lot of it fell on me. And I had a chance to go, ooh, I don't feel like you've had that. At least not the way I've had that.
Yeah, no, there was, I would say, after my mom passed, there was this feeling. It was very different. It was a relief physically that I wasn't, having to change her diaper and roll her over and bathe her and all that kind of stuff. So the physical challenge, there was a break from that. But I feel like it lasted like maybe 6 months. And then I noticed that my dad was really starting to change, and then uh, um, he was starting to get a little worse. And, he stopped gardening last year.
Hmm.
The year before, he wasn't really doing much. Last year, my siblings planted the garden. He wasn't out looking at it or doing anything. It was more my husband that was watering it. And, it was kind of unkept because he wasn't doing it. And this year, I know he's not going to be doing any gardening for sure, because he's physically weaker this year than he was last year. So it's not the same. It's not the same care as it was for my mom, but it's a different kind of care, and yeah, I feel like we had a bit of a maybe 6 months break before it was a different kind of challenge now that we were facing,
I
you
know
know
that we've discussed a lot of the negatives, Terry. I know that, and they're hard to ignore.
yes,
They're too obvious to ignore. But do you at least look back at all of this time, and you're still in it? Are you regarding this time as time spent with your parents while you still have them?
absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point, because despite all of that, it has been a blessing to be able to care for them
Yeah.
the way they cared for me. And I can tell you that, I went through a lot of challenges early on. I divorced, and I had two young children, and, I had some challenges, and my parents were always there for me. And so to be able to, that was my way of giving back, especially my mom.
Yeah.
My dad is approaching his 96th birthday, and, if
Wow.
yeah, and he's in great shape.
Yeah.
And uh, and I love the fact that, we sit on the couch every night and we have dinner. We do it picnic style. It's something that we did with my mom when she was in the hospital bed and she felt left out from dinner, so we decided to have dinner in the living room, picnic style, so that we're around the TV, and my mom sees us. And after my mom passed away, I said, Dad, do you want to have dinner at the table? No, I want to have the picnic style like we did with. Okay. And we still do that.
That's great.
And every night we watch Family Feud and we share the stories of the day. And I think to myself, how lucky am I that, he may not remember what he had for breakfast, but he still remembers stories from when he was, 8 years old. And it's very easy to prompt him with questions about, Dad, do you remember what the farm was like? Or do you remember so and so? Or do you remember, that situation when, and he starts talking, and and even my husband will say, your dad shared some details about this story. I know I've heard this story 20 times, maybe 50 times, but there's some new details that he shared. Did you notice? I, yeah. And it's such a privilege, really, to spend that kind of time with him. And I'm lucky, because not everybody is in a situation where they can move in with their parents and take care of them. Some people, unfortunately, have to send their parents to an old age home or something like that. I didn't want to. That was the whole point that I've been saying over the last 20 years. When the time comes, I don't want to send them to an old age home. I want to do as much as I can. And my mom always said, I want to die at home. And I pray that my father dies at home, you know?
Yeah.
And so there are lots of times where we share stories and memories, and I think I'm so lucky that we're here to do this. And sometimes we just sit on the couch and we watch TV and we don't say anything, but I'm still sitting beside my dad.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so been a lot of good times, and those moments are precious to me. And even my husband will say, it's kind of it's weird because he didn't get to do that with his father. He had a strained relationship with his father, and my husband, I think, really appreciates what we have with my dad and what we had with my mom. And more often than not now, we'll remember the good things. We'll remember the sweet stories that my mom had, and the moments. My husband used to make my mom a special chocolate chai tea that she never tasted before, and she loved it. And when she was in the hospital, before I brought her home, she said to him, "Roy, when I come home, you make me tea?" And Roy still remembers that moment. And I remember the tears in her eyes when she had tea. It was the simplest thing, but it
Yeah.
was such a memory. So those are the things that I'm going to carry with me. Yes, there are plenty of good times that will dwarf the bad times. And I have to focus on that too.
Well, good. Enjoy those memories and the memories that you're still making right now. And I know the best version of your mother is looking down very proudly at you and at the time that you getting to spend with your dad. Caregiver Terri Oswald, our best to your father, and thank you for letting us get to know your mother as well. We really appreciate it, Terri. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity as well, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Sammut. This has been another episode of Amintro Family, the podcast, which you can hear on the Amintro Family app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out amintrofamily.com. And a reminder, you want to hear your stories on the forum, and we can share them here as well on Amintro Family, the podcast.